Hello and welcome to Anthony Johnson Speaks, the podcast where we talk about love. I'm your host and emotional intelligence coach, Anthony Johnson. In each episode, we'll discuss various aspects of relationships: dating, marriage, attachment style, breakups, and mindset. After all, you need to have your mindset in check if you want to meet and keep a fantastic partner, right? We will also have a special focus on our friends and family in the military because military relationships can be a bit more challenging. And my mission is to serve. I speak from a psychology degree, numerous certifications, personal experience, practical insights, wisdom, and a long list of tools for personal growth, trust and confidence, and more intimate connections in your relationships. Whether you've just started dating or you've been married for years, join the 12-week Consciously Connected Couples program and learn to connect on a deeper, more intimate level. Check out anthony-johnson.com and Anthony Johnson Speaks on Insta and TikTok. And finally, don't forget, every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we will read your questions sent to the show from fan mail. To send a question from fan mail, simply open your podcast app and click on the link in the podcast description where it says, "Send a text message to the show." Thank you for tuning in, and let's begin this transformative love relationship journey together. Hey everybody, welcome to Anthony Johnson Speaks Love, the podcast where we talk about all things relationships. Whether you're dating, married, or just kind of out there looking around, you'll learn how emotional intelligence helps you improve your relationships. Today we have a special guest, Kristal Desantis. Kristal will talk to us today about her new book about how mental health can affect men in relationships, how men can learn to talk about sex and intimacy either with other male friends or in therapy or counseling, and also how things are changing and how roles are changing in relationships. So sit back, relax, and we're coming at you. All right, so since we have all that great information about Kristal, let's sit back and relax, and Kristal will tell us a little bit more about what she does and why she's doing it, and it should be a really enjoyable show. So Kristal, welcome. I guess give us a little bit of background on how you started therapy and marriage counseling and what got you into it and kind of where you are now.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited for this conversation. So I am a therapist, a marriage and family therapist in Austin, Texas. And my journey to being a marriage and family therapist really started with my own journey in dating.
Okay.
I realized, that there was a lot that I didn't know about how to have a healthy relationship. When I first started dating, I met my husband on a dating app, and I realized that, oh gosh, I like this guy, and I don't know how to make this relationship work. So I went to therapy. I ended up working with a marriage and family therapist, and that's when I realized there's a lot out there that I can learn, and then I kept learning, and then I got my master's, and now this is what I do, and then I wrote my book. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
Okay. I guess that's kind of a familiar story for a lot of people. Having things that you're going through that you find a little bit challenging and then working through them and thinking, hey, 8 billion people on the planet, I'm sure someone is going through the same thing that I'm going through, and now I can help them. So that's a great story. I have a similar situation. It was more on the, I guess, emotional intelligence side and attachment side. And once I blew up at a dinner with friends I realized after that meeting that, hey, that wasn't even me. That was like the 5-year-old version of me lashing out because it felt abandoned. So, similar situation. I was like, I gotta work on this and do something about it and figure it out. So now that
Yeah.
20 years of therapy didn't help me as much as I helped myself, but now that I'm through it, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm sure there are other people out there going through the same thing, so I can probably help them.
Yeah, good for you. And that's the very, like you said, it's finding value ourselves in our own journey and then being able to turn around and share it with others is, yeah, it's really lovely.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I found interesting is that there is a focus on men and masculinity, and
Mhm.
I have a men's group as well, which is a meetup group, and we meet a few times a month usually for a call for all the men. Because I realized in coaching couples, a lot of time the male would sit there and not say too much. And then when I got the male on a call alone, it was like this and this and that and she and I. And I thought, oh man, they really don't talk when their partner or their wife is there. So I started splitting them up and getting a lot more information that was helpful to the relationship. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you focus on men specifically, or?
Well, I think that's kind of exactly what you just mentioned is, I think there's a stereotype that men don't talk a lot or that they don't have a lot to say or that, therapy is a waste of time for men. And I really just, I know men and I know that men have a lot more to say. And so that's why I wanted to focus on working with men and giving them the space to express themselves. And I wanted to hear what they have to say. And yeah, so that's really what led me to my focus is kind of the same as you. It's just like, wait a minute. I feel like there's something that's not being said, and how can we hear what needs to be said? And maybe sometimes it's we need to change the environment, and we need to just make space for it. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. Understandable. Would you say that that was one of the things that you found challenging in the beginning of your relationship?
So my partner, my husband, um, he actually had done a lot of self-work, um, you know, before we met. He was
Okay.
married previously. He went through a divorce. He was a father. And so, that was something that I was like, wow, he really, like, there's a lot to this man. And that's what also was so attractive about him. I was like, man, he has so much to say, and I'm super interested in hearing all of this. And so again, as I was doing my own work internally for the relationship with him, it just really stuck with me. And when I started to become a counselor and a marriage and family therapist, is like, I know that there are men out there that have a lot to say, that have been through a lot and they want to share it. But, a lot of therapy, sometimes the stereotype is that it's for women. It's for women to tell, air their grievances. It's for women to get the space they need. And so I just really wanted to, make sure that the men had a space for that as well. And yeah, my husband played a big role because, he is, obviously, we've been married now we've been together for 14 years and, he still is a very interesting individual and I still want to hear what he has to say.
Right. Okay. Understandable as well. Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed is I had a handful of males in the coaching session say, I don't have a lot to say. I'm only doing this because she wants to. So you sit there and you're thinking, okay, well, is this going to be helpful to you and the relationship if you're not going to put in a little more effort than that?
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that I wanted to ask you are, there's a lot of misconceptions, like you said, around masculinity and relationships. And I was wondering if you could go through some of those misconceptions about masculinity and relationships and how you work towards overcoming those misconceptions.
Yeah, I think, you hit on, well, we've already started talking about one, which is the idea that, men don't have a lot to say when it comes to relationships. I also think another one that is a harmful stereotype is the idea that men don't have emotions. Kind of like you mentioned, is, of course, men have emotions. And sometimes, we see these emotions erupt in ways that are damaging. But that's not the only way that people can express their emotions. But often for men, getting angry or shutting down is really kind of the only couple of ways that men have been taught is okay to express their emotions.
Right.
And some of those stereotypes, and the other idea that, men are not relational, that, men just would prefer to be alone. I don't if you're a human being, nobody prefers to be alone. People are alone either by choice if they've been really hurt by others, and so they've shifted into protection mode, or they're alone because, they've been left out or they don't have a place where they feel like they belong. But nobody, this whole idea that, alpha men are lone wolves and that, men are just made to be alone and they're not relational is again, another myth that I found really damaging relationships.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. There's so many. I could keep going, but those yeah, there are a lot of myths around that.
And then I guess, would you say that is something that we've started to encounter in the last 5-10 years, or is that just something that's always been around?
Those myths, I think that have started to be talked about a lot more in the last couple of years. I think there are a lot more men realizing that those stereotypes are harmful to them and just their ability to be human and to be seen as who they are in their own humanness and their own version of masculinity, and not have to be kind of confined to these roles of real men don't cry. Which, so those stereotypes about masculinity have been around for a really long time. And I think it's only recently that men are starting to challenge some of those and be like, wait a minute, I can cry and be a very masculine man. These two things can totally coexist. Or, I am very invested in my relationships and I care a lot about the people I love and I invest in my friendships. And that doesn't make me whatever negative stereotype about my masculinity or my sexuality. And just, same thing, a man that is expressive and emotionally intelligent doesn't make you any less of a man. If anything, it makes you an evolved, mature, high functioning individual.
Right.
And we can also be those versions of ourselves.
Yeah. I think I get thrown into a lot of what's going on with men and how we're trying to shift that dynamic, because once I go on social and I start looking at certain things, then the algorithm automatically sends me everyone. So just in my, I guess, last year, I've noticed there are not only men, but a lot of women in coaching and in counseling and in therapy that are also focused on how can we help men get out of, this thing that feels like, oh, we're in this trench now and we can't dig our way out. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm loving this, this change in the conversation about men. I think for a while it was pretty negative towards men, and I'm starting to hear a little bit, like you said, a little bit more empowering, a little bit more hope, a little bit more what if we did focus on what men need rather than just telling them that they're the problem.
Right.
And so I love this, and I'm here for it.
And then also, so I guess, society and expectations and masculinity, femininity, whatever it is. So specifically around masculinity and men seeking therapy, I think that there's this line between mental health with regard to maybe anger management and then mental health with regard to sex and intimacy. So personally, I think I would probably be more open to going to therapy if I thought, oh, I got this anger thing, I need to manage that, versus, oh, I got this sex and intimacy thing, I don't want anybody to know. Like, I'm not going to say anything to my friends or family, and I'm not going to say anything in therapy. So are you seeing in your experience that there's a little bit of a shift in men opening up about sex and intimacy when they're in therapy?
Yes. Yes. And I'm also trained in sex therapy. So
Okay.
that's a part of the work that I do as well. And this is something that, again, I think this is part of changing the dynamic of this idea that men just have to accept. And I know this is, like you said, kind of the online narrative, right? It's like, when you get married, you're going to end up like having a bad sex life, or that you're never going to get as much sex as you want anymore. And just, this kind of negative idea that like your sex is just going to tank when you just expect to be unhappy sexually, or with your intimacy needs when you get married. And this whole, just the whole stereotype about that. And what I'm seeing is men starting to kind of internalize and hear the message that like, wait a minute, no, my needs are also important, and my fulfillment and my intimacy needs are also important, which is again different than simply sexual needs. And I think, starting to have those conversations, there's this, I love sharing resources, but there's a couple of great books that I have that I like to share. One is called The New Male Sexuality. There's another one called Not Always in the Mood. There's another one called Honest Sex that I always love to share with men. Another one, I can just keep going, but so I'm Better Man. It's just like really about the empowerment of, again, like changing the narrative from the idea that like men's sexuality is inherently predatory or harmful. And instead, starting to say like, well, if it's used for connection, how does it show up differently in your relationship?
Right.
And if it's, yeah. So anyway, I could keep going on that. I love sex therapy. I love doing that work with couples. Enhancing their intimate connection is huge.
Right. And then I think another small piece of that is how many men think that sex is just kind of the sex thing, and either I need to be happy or I need to make her happy, and not really being, I guess, wholly involved as, two people becoming one and having that have more meaning than, we're married, we have sex. And having it be more of a a spiritual or a ritual that is something that brings you together. Is that something that you feel like men at this point are open to or understand, or do you help them in that area as well?
Every man is different. And I think there are men that are, very aware of that, that kind of maybe like spiritual sexuality and all of that. But then I also work with men who, they, like you said, they maybe haven't ever talked about it. They don't even know how to talk about it. And so I just, there's a wide spectrum. And I just think that the transparency in the conversation, that's starting to be there around all of this is just going to help all men to feel empowered to talk about it. Because, right now I think we're seeing a wide range of, men that are getting really comfortable talking about it. And there's still a large portion of men who are not comfortable talking about it. And it's difficult. So I think that's, in my role as a therapist is making sure that the space is safe enough so that it can be talked about in a way that doesn't bring up shame, that doesn't bring up any kind of, extra shame or trauma, but really be a space for healing and connection.
Right.
And really getting the sex you want.
Right. Yeah. I think I don't believe a lot of people are into thinking that that's what a relationship is. That's the basis of a relationship. Go into the relationship and heal. I think many people think the second something goes wrong, I should probably get out and find someone else. But experience has shown me that when you have something going on emotionally, internally, every relationship you go into, it's going to show up. So it's probably a lot easier to work through it and not have to go through it over and over and over again.
Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah, I kind of talk about that in my book about like, you might, when you don't have that awareness and you don't heal that part of yourself, like you might pick a different partner, but you might be picking the same pattern, right? And so that's also, finding healing in like, whether in a relationship or just on your own, it's a really good gift you can give yourself.
Right. And I think another topic that we're seeing a little bit more of on social is the fact that gender and the roles of male, female, specifically in heterosexual relationships, but I guess also in any type of relationship, there's a dynamic where someone takes on more of the masculine, someone takes on more of the feminine. Have you seen any specific changes over the last few years where men are more in their feminine energy and women are more in their masculine energy, or have you noticed that it's about the same?
I mean, yeah, things have definitely changed over the years. And I think this is kind of where we are as a culture is, finding, this is this is a huge conversation, right? But I think
Right.
It was like the 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 parameters of gender expression were so narrow that it was like, if you are a man, then you do blank, right? And if you are a woman, then you do blank. And I think this is where it's kind of like, does that make you a man? Or is it simply like your internal sense of, being a man is what makes you a man, right? And so, yes, your behavior, like you could be, maybe you paint your nails with your daughter, and does that make you less of a man? No, it does not, right?
Right.
Or like maybe you are the house, you're that primary parent, and you're the one that takes care of the house. Does that make you less of a man? In previous generations where they had very strict gender roles, that would challenge your sense of masculinity if in your society, right, in your community. But now I think that's where we're just kind of on this cusp of transformation. Like, I mean, back in the day was when Katharine Hepburn wore pants on TV. People were like, "Oh, Lord," I'm like, "What's happening?" Or what? What is happening? Like, I can't fly planes, and just like there were so many, so there were a lot of things that were attached to gender that, maybe as time has gone on, it's like, is that really a gender thing, or is it just maybe a thing that any human can do if they have enough training and they have enough, if they have the space and the empowerment to make that choice. And so I think that's where we're kind of seeing that for men and for women. It's just like, are these things inherently male or female, or are they just like, we need to be honest with ourselves about what we want to do and how we want to show up.
Right. And I think, each individual couple is going to have their own, dynamic, and what works for them may not work for another couple. So each couple has to find that thing. Yeah. On social, as I navigate social so I can figure out, what the older people are thinking, what the younger people are thinking. And a lot of the males on my TikTok account, the majority of them are probably 18 to 24-ish. And it seems like they've lost faith in dating. They certainly don't plan on getting married. So it's kind of this dynamic of women are against men. They don't need us. So why do we even bother? Do you have any, advice for the younger men that are under 25 and feel like they're just being shot down at every turn because people swipe on the app and they're not interesting enough?
Yeah, and I would say, it is brutal out there, right? So like the dating apps and the whole social media thing, like, again, it's definitely affecting dating, but it's affecting just human relationships in general, right? Like some of the conversations on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on, like the ways that people are interacting with each other are profoundly different than any other generation, right? Like the way that people talk to each other on these apps is like brutal. Like you wouldn't talk to somebody in person like that, right? And so that's also the same thing with what's happened to the dating culture. Is people are like it's being like commodifying the human relationship has really changed the way, the experience of dating. And so I think that's what a lot of these young men are feeling, right? They're like, I feel like I'm just, being looked at as like I'm being objectified for the like, this is
Right.
a really bad experience. Like, yeah, being objectified sucks. Like being evaluated as an object is like a very demoralizing experience, and it's not good for anybody, whether male or female. And so I think that's, like social media apps, dating apps, it's almost like we've kind of tipped the edge, where at first it started out as a way to bring people together, and then kind of maybe it's now starting to drive people apart, and maybe we need some, but this is evolution, right? This is how societies change and evolve is, we hit something and then we gotta evolve and figure it out for the next step. And so that's what I would just encourage some of these young men is, yes, it is really brutal out there. It makes total sense if you're very discouraged and feeling like you're just being objectified and it feels very bad. Totally get it. And also, this is also something else when it comes to men and their sense of self-worth, is for a long time, men relied on their status of we needed them. Women needed them, right? Like up until 1970, women couldn't open a bank account and, open a credit card, and women literally needed men in order to survive in society.
Right.
And well, the idea that, women don't need men anymore, this is very threatening. It's like, well, actually, it could be threatening, or it could be very freeing in that you are going to find a partner at some point who doesn't need you for your wallet, or that, you have a house, but that she will actually want you, that you will actually be in a relationship where what it feels like to be wanted and desired for who you are, not for what you can provide. And that is a whole different type of relationship. And that is super powerful. And it's okay if you don't meet that person when you're 18,
Yeah.
and it's okay that you don't meet that, so that's something I always want to encourage. It's like, it's actually a good thing that you're not in a relationship with somebody who just needs you. Like, it is so powerful in a relationship with somebody who wants you.
And I think there are a lot of men that, even though things are changing and relationships are changing, I think there are a lot of men that are still stuck in that dynamic of, well, if I'm not making more and taking care of, then I don't feel like I'm important or worth it. And that's something that we have to get used to and kind of be okay with it, and not look at it as, oh, well, that means I'm less of a man. So I think,
and it is
one of the things that the younger people are looking at is, I go on dates and she makes more money than me, so why bother? Versus, see how it works out in other areas, not just money.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, again, where I would love young men to think of them, like, give themselves a little bit more credit. Like, you're more than just a paycheck. Like, you're more interesting. I promise you're more interesting than just a wallet, right? And if that woman that you're on a date with doesn't find you more interesting, like she only is interested in your money, then clearly she's not a keeper, But also is, again, like being able as a man or as anybody, but, we're talking specifically to young men. And I talk about this in my book that, in the past, men were expected to be the protectors, the providers, and that was their worth in the dating marketplace, right? Ooh, this one can provide this much money, and this one is very strong and he can protect. And again, that was objectifying in a different way, right? And being able as a man now to say, like, I might not provide like a big, huge paycheck, but I provide emotional safety. I provide internal stability. I provide pleasure. I provide joy. I provide a sense of purpose. That's my value that I bring to a partnership. I bring my collaboration skills. I bring my communication skills. I bring my conflict resolution skills. Like, I provide a lot of value. Sure, I can't put a number on that, but I have value that I provide in a relationship. And I can protect my partner from, my own demons, because I've done my work to be self-aware. So I know, like, I can protect her from, her fear that I would cheat on her. I can protect her from that. She doesn't have to worry about that, right? And it's no longer the, wolves at the door, or the Vikings coming to take your girl. It's going to be, cheating. It's going to be addiction. It's going to be those kinds of things. So as a man, being able to say, like, I can protect my family from those things is like, you can do it now.
Kristal, I really like that. Because it's almost like when I read these comments on social, it's almost like I have one thing that I'm looking for, and if that doesn't work, then nothing else matters. And what you're saying is kind of like, take some time and sit down and think about what can you offer in a relationship besides money. So that's probably, that's a good thing that the listeners can do if you're 18 to 24 or actually any age. Think about all the things that you can bring into a relationship that don't involve only money or only a strong arm.
And also that's where, you will set your relationship up for long-term success, and also your mental health will also be in a better place, because you'll not always be wondering if your partner's looking around trying to trade you in for the guy that makes, 5 times more than you do. Right. And so having that confidence that like, this person doesn't need me. She makes her own money or, whatever, but she wants me. And this is why she wants me, because I'm all these, I'm all this, like I would choose me. I'm awesome. Right. And having that kind of sense that like, I don't want to be in a relationship where somebody is just dependent on me, and I'm not ever quite sure if they would love me if I lost my job. Because again, like life is long. We don't know where it goes. You might get sick. You might, change your job. Lots of things happen. And so to have that mental security that like, I know my partner doesn't need me, but damn, I feel wanted by her. And I have no question about that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, exactly. So then one of the things I wanted to ask you, so your book is Strong, a relationship field guide for the modern man.
Yep.
Is it any man, any age, or would you say that it focuses on any particular group?
I mean, it really is. And so this is where I would say it's written for the man that is looking to have a modern relationship, which I guess I, differentiated as opposed to more the traditional relationship where the roles are like very clearly defined.
Okay.
Right. And so there's listening that's like, I just want to make a bunch of money so that I can just have a wife and just, like I just want the traditional model. Then you might not want to read. Because my book talks about like, how can you be in a relationship that requires you to maybe play a couple of different roles, right? Like maybe you will be the breadwinner at one point. Maybe the next point she was going to be the higher breadwinner, or, parenting, be a parent. Like most modern women want an equal partner when it comes to parenting. Like, what does that look like for you?
Right.
So it's not a dating book. It's more of, it is a relationship book. So that's also the caveat, say.
Right. Yeah. Being open to how the relationship can flow for both of you without getting trapped in men do this and women do this. will make for much.
Yeah. And without losing yourself, right? I think there's a lot of, maybe like you said, like a lot of these younger men are saying like, well, what's the use of being in a relationship if it's always going to be about the woman? And I guess that's what I'm like, well, here's also a guide, written, I'm a woman, but I'm also a therapist. I'm like, and also this will help you look out for women who don't want equality either, right? So there are lots of women that also just want their bills paid, right? There's stuff there. And so, if you want somebody who's an equal partner who wants to be there for you, or you want somebody to, have your back as much as you have hers, like also being able to recognize kind of the red flags of, when somebody is not really looking for an authentic partnership.
Right. Okay. And I think also being aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it in the relationship. I had a gentleman on a call probably in the spring that was in his early 50s. And he said, I got married 30 years ago and I had 3 daughters And he's like, now I'm 53 and I realize all I ever wanted to do was make all of them happy. And I kind of lost myself. So they were happy, but I never really thought, what do I want and how do I want this to go? And I think that's something that a lot of men struggle with. How can I make her happy? What I want or need doesn't matter too much. Right. So I think reading your book will probably give them a lot of insight into how to navigate that and also, you know, keep in touch with who they are and what they want to be in the relationship as well.
Absolutely. And that's like you said, that's so crucial that, you know who you are and what you want, so that you can also bring that into the relationship and find a partner who cares about that. Right. Because, I think I hear you. There's lots of men that kind of wake up one day and they're like, oh, I don't even know what I like. I haven't paid attention to my needs in a long time. And that, that can be a pretty sobering realization. It can also be really sad, to realize like, oh, wow, I've really not taken care of myself at all for however many years. And, better, and, better late than never. There's no wrong time to have that, but, starting early,
right. Okay.
Going into a relationship like that is always a good thing.
And as we're wrapping up, I just thought of something. It's kind of a personal question, but I know there's a lot of guys out there that are going through the same or a similar situation. And that is men, I guess, talking with men and men supporting men. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and he's always, getting guys, I love you, man, and call me every day and give me a hug. And I think a lot of men still kind of, they cringe at that. Is there something that you have that you can talk to us about, or something you can reference in the book that maybe helps men feel more open to doing that and having male relationships?
I 100%, like there's such a need for more men supporting other men. And there is like a big movement of that right now. And I think that's something I maybe just came up for me when you were saying that is I like to share on my Instagram, like, posts from, men that are doing that work and just normalizing. Because one of the things I noticed with a lot of men is, they're like, men don't do that. And so just to have examples of like, yes, they do. Look at these like badass men that are like really showing up for each other. And so again, just kind of like, what's the thing? It's like, you can't be it if you don't see it, or, something just like the power of representation. Right.
Right. Okay.
So just like that's what I offer. Like, I'm not a man. I don't have a men's group. I share those resources like you, and that's why I like to, have these conversations, because I want those boys or those young men or, any man who's like, that's not a man thing. Men don't do that. To be able to be like, here's proof that they do, there's a lot of men that are doing that, and just normalizing so it can start to change the conversation about like, yeah, men absolutely show up for each other, and this is how. And they can be vulnerable with each other, and they can say, I love you. And yeah, it's a very needed thing.
Right. And I don't know where I heard this. It's kind of like this scenario of, if you ever look at two men talking, or if you're a guy and you're talking to your guy friends, you're always next to them. You're not facing them. And if you face off, it's kind of like you're in a confrontation or you're ready to fight. And
yeah.
I thought about it, and I'm thinking, oh, every time I talk to my male friends, it is kind of like, let me turn to the side, or it's always a pretty good conversation if we're in the car and I'm driving or they're driving. And it's kind of like, all right, I can say this now. My shoulder is the same as his shoulder, and we're not looking at each other. Would you say that whatever you need to do to make it easier for you to open up, just go ahead and do it without,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, actually, that is a piece of research I did put in my book about men having shoulder to shoulder conversations is more comfortable than face to face conversations. So yeah, go with what will go, but just taking that step, right? Sending that text like, hey buddy, thought about you today. Like the story of us in blank just crossed my mind, thought I should share. And just those little tiny points of connection. Again, I think sometimes it's, going to get bogged down and, oh gosh, how will this be received? Like, don't overthink it. Like if you feel it, honor that feeling. And it's a little point of connection that maybe your friend was having a really hard day. And, a lot of men suffer in silence. And just to have a little point of connection that like, hey, no, you're not alone in the universe. Like it might be since we talked, but like you just crossed my mind. I just want to let you know that you made an impact on me. We really, again, reminding them what they matter, like to each other, right? It's like telling your buddy, like, yeah, I still think about you. It's a way of telling him that matters to you and he made an impact, which is a very powerful thing.
Yes, exactly. All right, Kristal, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us all of that valuable information for our listeners. Can you let everyone know your book title again, where it's available, and then where they can find you on social?
Yeah. The book is called Strong, A Relationship Field Guide for the Modern Man. It's on Amazon and on Audible if you prefer to listen. And my Instagram handle is ATX Therapist, because I'm in Austin, Texas, so ATX Therapist. And then my website is just strong.love.
Strong.love. Oh, okay. I like that. A little bit different from your .com, but very easy to remember. Strong.love.
What?
All righty. So once again, thank you, Kristal, for coming on the show and talking to everyone about how to improve their relationship and be in their masculine energy. And hopefully we can have you back again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Claudie. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you today.
All righty. Thank you. Hey everybody, that concludes our episode. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you got some valuable information. Please be sure to check out our other episodes, starting with episode number 11. Do you have a question? Every Friday at 12 noon Eastern, we will be answering your questions sent in through fan mail. For access to fan mail, go to the podcast app, look in the description, and click on the link where it says send a text message to the show. Check out Anthony-Johnson.com for the 12-week Consciously Connected Couples program, where you will learn to connect on a deeper, more intimate level. Also, Anthony Johnson Speaks on Insta and TikTok. Thank you for listening, and please be sure to download the episode, send to a friend, and tune in for the next upcoming show. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.